The UN General Assembly's recent vote on a ceasefire in Gaza has had overwhelming backing. Yet Israel still insists it will continue with its air and ground offensive against Hamas, which is classified as a terror group by the US, EU and other countries. The Israeli military has now designated a narrow strip in South Gaza called Al-Mawasi as a humanitarian zone. It has directed Gazans to relocate there, but the area lacks the basic necessities of shelter and water for thousands of displaced refugees.
A strip of barren land, crammed with desperate Gazans seeking safety. Enas Mosleh heeded Israel's call to flee to Al-Mawasi in southern Gaza when her home was bombed. She now lives with her children in a thin plastic tent.
There is no place for us to wash or pray. If we want to wash our kids' hands, there is no place for that. There is nowhere we can bake or get bread. There is no bakery or supermarket. It's a completely remote area.
Enas and other Palestinians in Al-Mawasi describe it as dangerously overcrowded and lacking in basic necessities like shelter, medical services and food. But Israel has described Al-Mawasi as a humanitarian zone and issued orders for civilians to evacuate there, saying aid will arrive.
We've been making, again, with everything we have at in our capabilities, every effort we can to facilitate the movement of civilians in the south in order to mitigate civilian casualties. And we're doing everything we can to set the conditions for the humanitarian zone in the Al-Mawasi coastline.
The area makes up just a tiny fraction of the densely populated Gaza Strip, about 14 square kilometres. Israel has changed the exact borders of the safe zone several times, and some evacuation orders have not mentioned Al-Mawasi at all. Aid groups have called Israel's offer of safety a cruel mirage and say the situation in Al-Mawasi is dire.
If you imagine a car park of people stacked on top of each other, still without a toilet, still without a drop of water. So here you would absolutely have zones that are zones of disease and would become, in any sane projection, zones of death. So it's such an important narrative to break, this idea that people can just go to a safe zone if they wish. There is absolutely nothing safe about this.
The Gazans sheltering in Al-Mawasi say they have found no sense of safety there.
We spend all night listening to the bombing. We are living between life and death. At any moment, it may be our turn and our kids' turn to die.
The United Nations says more than 85% of Gaza's population has been displaced by the war, and that here in Al-Mawasi, like everywhere in Gaza, there is nowhere truly safe to go.
And journalist Hazem Balusha told me about the status of humanitarian aid delivery meant to reach people in Al-Mawasi.
Well, this is the problem, not only in Al-Mawasi, across the Gaza Strip. We are talking three places, like North Gaza, the South, and Al-Mawasi. North Gaza is suffering from the shortage of everything. According to the people I talked to and the reports coming from there is nothing from anything delivered there except the time when there was the pause. The South is like, we are talking about 1.9 million people are living in a very small area, and the need is very high for the Al-Mawasi. Al-Mawasi is it's a designed place, a small place. Not everybody is there. So some organizations are delivering aid, but it's not enough, of course.
Now, the IDF keeps calling Al-Mawasi a humanitarian zone. I wonder if the Israeli army is doing anything to facilitate that.
Well, what the Israeli army is doing is calling people to go there. And they said from the first day of when asked the people to go or to evacuate to the south. But what they are doing is like, according to the people, no bombardment there. But I mean, it's not clear who's responsible for it. UNRWA said, like, we have no responsibility for that area. It's not under our duty. Other organizations as well, they are saying we don't know, but still some charities and some organizations only delivering some food and some aid, which is people still say it's not enough, and especially in this rainy and cold weather.
Hazem, is there any place in Gaza that's actually safe for civilians?
This is the question I've been asked like all the time. Of course not. There is no shelters. Protected shelters as a proper shelter for Gazans. Many people were killed, or some, at least according to the officials, about 40 or even more % of the casualties were from the south, where the people asked to leave too, and many people were displaced from the north, and they were killed in the south. A huge number of people were matching this case. All the people in Gaza say no safe place. Of course, there is some places less danger than others, especially the areas where the ground invasion is taking place.
The UN General Assembly has voted overwhelmingly for a ceasefire, and President Biden has criticized Israel for its, quote, indiscriminate bombing in Gaza. Do people in Gaza think that the world is on their side?
In Gaza, they care first about the basic needs that they want at this level. Second, they call for an immediate ceasefire. Third, they complain and criticize the whole world because they are not doing enough for them, whether helping them in these circumstances or pushing Israel to stop the hostilities. They think they are abandoned, isolated, and they left alone. This is the common thing that I hear from people, ordinary people across the Gaza Strip. Of course, there are some efforts every day that when I'm talking to people there and they ask me what's happening, is there a sign of a ceasefire or something? People talking about, but definitely they feel that they are abandoned and alone.
We'll leave it there for the time being. Thanks so much for joining us, journalist Hazem Balusha in Amman.
Thank you.
All right, let's get more on this from Peter Lerner, spokesperson of the Israeli Defense Forces. He joins me from Tel Aviv. Mr. Lerner, US President Joe Biden says Israel is carrying out, quote, indiscriminate bombing in Gaza. What is the idea of doing to change that?
Good morning, Viresh. Indeed, the IDF is continuing its efforts in order to dismantle and destroy Hamas and make sure that they never have the power again to conduct a brutal massacre as they did on the 7th of October. We are very attentive to our American allies, specifically the administration, and also from a military to military perspective. And we are listening very carefully to their messages. Their messages are in line with our overall goal of dismantling and destroying Hamas. And of course, we are operating within the foundations, within the framework of the laws of armed conflict. Our military activities are targeted at Hamas's infrastructure in order to dismantle and achieve our goals.
We understand that, but then what are you doing to not bomb Gaza indiscriminately, as the US president was pointing to there?
The IDF does not conduct indiscriminate fire. I would argue that the reality on the ground, and we have really released extensive footage that DW has been broadcasting over the last 2 months of precision strikes, the strikes at specific targets, at strikes that are based on intelligence, based on understanding, based on military necessity, in accordance with the laws of armed conflict.
Then why are so many civilians? Sorry for interrupting, sir. Then why are so many civilians dying?
We will continue our war in order to achieve our goals and remove the threat of Hamas. The civilian casualties, and every single one of those is an individual tragedy and a tragedy for the community and the people of Gaza.
Right.
They are nevertheless based out of the understanding of Hamas's concept of operations. Hamas have intentionally positioned its capabilities, all of its capabilities, beneath hospitals, in schools, in mosques, in and around UN facilities, in residential areas. They're doing it exactly to exasperate the civilian strife. Our goal is not to strike civilians. On the contrary, we're going out of our way to, and sometimes putting ourselves at risk to evacuate civilian areas so that we can conduct our strikes against Hamas exactly and as expected of us.
You are evacuating a number of civilians, I'd imagine, in southern Gaza to Al-Mawasi. Is that correct, or are there other evacuation zones as well?
So we've, throughout the course of this war, in the last 2 months, we've evacuated people from different locations to safer locations to get them specifically out of harm's way, precisely because how Hamas has established its centers
which are these
of
safe
gravity,
locations?
Centers of,
could you just tell us which are these safe locations?
The safe, as I said, it depends on specific locations, that it's not only one location, but when there are operations under conduct, when there are operations taking places in specific locations, like in against specific targets again in Khan Yunis. So we evacuate that specific area and tell people where to go specifically.
The UN's Emergency Relief Coordinator, Martin Griffiths, said last week, and I'm sorry again for interrupting, he said last week there is, quote, no place safe for civilians in southern Gaza. Is he lying?
I would say that the UN need to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, telling Israel not to defend itself, not to protect itself, not to change the paradigm in relations to Israel and Gaza is unacceptable for Israel. We won't sit back and not protect Israeli civilians because Hamas are hiding behind Palestinian civilians. That is an absurd expectation from us. Our responsibility is to change the paradigm. Our responsibility is to make sure that what happened on the 7th of October can never, ever happen. Need to be part of solving this and alleviating the situation. That is precisely why, as you correctly reported, we are increasing the efforts of the humanitarian aid, the access. Today, we will have another 200 trucks which will access into Gaza, and this is a number that has been increasing day by day. Unfortunately, it's not the Israeli side that are preventing it, but rather what we're seeing this morning is that Hamas are not opening the Palestinian side of Rafah and not facilitating the access of the humanitarian aid itself. So we need to ask ourselves again, why is Hamas preventing humanitarian aid from the people of Gaza?
Why is Israel not opening the Kerem Shalom crossing for trucks to cross through?
Kerem Shalom is closed. Kerem Shalom is closed precisely because Hamas decided to attack Israel. The goods are being inspected on the Israeli side, and they're continuing to the Egyptian side, where they can be processed by the Palestinians in Rafah.
We'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you so much for joining us today. Peter Lerner, IDF spokesperson. Thank you, sir.
Good day.